Thanks for listening to Gone at 21, Katelyn Markham's Death Investigation.
We went to North Carolina to see Brad. We went to his house. There was no one there. We went down the street and waited and watched a little while. We went back. There was no one home still. We decided to go back to our hotel rooms, have dinner, get settled in.
That's Lisa. She was my assistant on the Brad Vaughn bargain trip to North Carolina.
I remember us getting ready to go back to Brad's house and heard the slide of his gun chambering around. And that became a lot more real, a little bit frightening because of the reality of the circumstances.
Private investigators usually have protection on them. I, being former law enforcement, carry a gun. I have 2 different licenses to carry a gun. And North Carolina has an agreement with Florida, so licensees from both states can carry their weapons in the other state. They also have a similar agreement with private investigators. I know Florida only works with a handful of states, and North Carolina happens to be one of those states. When arriving at Brad's house that evening, I noticed a vehicle that wasn't there earlier. I told Lisa to stay in the vehicle but crack her window. I knocked on the front door and a stocky man answered the door who definitely was not Brad. It was his brother. He told me Brad wasn't home, so I took that opportunity to tell the brother who I was and why I was there. As I got ready to go, a car pulled up right behind mine on the street. "There he is," said the brother. "Let me talk to him first." Brad and his brother went into the garage and spoke for a couple minutes. I was standing in front of my vehicle, and Lisa was still in the passenger seat with her window cracked. Brad and his brother emerged from the garage and started walking towards me. Brad extended his arm for a handshake.
I saw Brad walking towards Ryan. He seemed very afraid, surprised and shocked that we were at his house.
Brad's whole body was shaking. His face was bright white. It was like I was talking to a ghost. I started out by telling Brad I was there because I have something that belonged to him, and DNA was extracted and is now being processed and compared to Katelyn's DNA profile. Yes, this was a tactic I used to get him to continue to speak to me because he's going to want to know what item I have. Now, at this point, I didn't really know what the results were of the blood in the car. But if that got him talking about what happened to Katelyn, if he knew anything at least, so be it. Brad's brother politely asked what item I was talking about. I told him that I couldn't go into detail, but if a DNA match was made, Brad should be expecting a visit from the police. Brad started talking. The brother went inside and let us speak privately. Brad said he was cold. It was around mid-60s with a cool breeze. He's from Cincinnati, but I'm from Florida, and he's cold. I was comfortable and figured this was a tactic to go inside and stop talking to me. I suggested we go talk on the porch to block the wind. We continued to talk on the porch, and I really saw how much Brad was shaking. Even his feet were shaking. I could see his shoes vibrating. I could also see that he was much more pale than I earlier thought. I know I only had one shot with Brad. I told him I was his only hope. I told him I would help him, but I needed to know what happened to Katelyn. Brad's eyes started watering. His mouth was trembling more violently. Then he asks, "Can we meet tomorrow? Tomorrow morning?" He wanted to get his thoughts together, and he said he would talk tomorrow and tell me everything he knew. I told him I would need to record him, and he said, "Okay, whatever we need to do." I shook his hand and walked back to the truck.
When I saw Brad and Ryan walking up to the porch, I thought that he would be able to get Brad to open up and tell him what he knew. When I saw Ryan walking back to the truck after about 10 minutes, I realized that nothing had probably been revealed, and I was right. I was surprised when Brad agreed to meet with us the next day, especially after knowing how many times he had canceled on us in the past.
All I could do was hope and pray that Brad didn't cancel on us again.
The next day was very interesting.
I called Brad and we agreed to meet at a local restaurant. He then told me I could not record him as he somewhat agreed to the day before. He said he couldn't add much to what he told me yesterday, but he would meet with me. So we are back to square one. The restaurant was very packed, so we decided to talk in the parking lot. I backed my truck into a parking spot and he pulled in forward. We were window to window, face to face. Brad seemed to have done an about face from the previous day. He wasn't shaking and the color in his face was back. It started to rain, but Brad was up for answering any questions I had that he felt comfortable talking about as far as Katelyn and John were concerned. He said that he was actually Katelyn's friend. Obviously, he met her at Panera Bread. They worked there together and began a friendship. He said that John and him were not close. Brad said he wasn't his cup of tea when referring to John. When asked what he thought happened, Brad said he thought there was an accident that occurred and panic set in. I asked if he thought John knew something or more than what he was saying, and he confirmed that was his belief.
I really believe that Brad spoke to someone, maybe an attorney, a friend, maybe even his brother. I think that's why he was more relaxed about answering questions, and I also believe that's why he didn't want to be recorded.
Brad's attitude toward the interview the next day did change dramatically in reference to being audio recorded. He also led me to believe the first day that there may be more. But there wasn't anything that would help me get closer to Katelyn's killer. After the interview with Brad, Lisa and I started our trip home. I remember thinking about the final night Katelyn spent on this earth and who had the answers. I felt like I had already spoken to that person in the 10 months that I had been investigating this case. And even though I had my suspicions, I still had to prove it. The rain got heavier as we reached the outskirts of town. It was peaceful. So my mind turned not so much to the investigation, but just to Katelyn. What a loss of talent. She had such a bright future. I kind of drifted back into the investigation and thought to myself, was Katelyn alive to hear the storm, to hear the rain that night when it came through Fairfield, August 13, 2011? Or was she already dead? I was determined not only to find that question out, but to find out exactly what happened and who was responsible for Katelyn's disappearance and death. On the trip home, I spoke to Detective Vance Patton of the Indiana State Police about my visit. He told me Brad called him and complained about me. Brad told Detective Patton he would speak to him, but he didn't want to talk to me anymore, and he didn't like that I showed up unannounced. I would learn Brad called the police on another private investigator that worked this case in the early days of the investigation. Indiana wasn't even involved in the case at that point, but from what I hear, the PI showed up at Brad's house, and he wouldn't speak to her. Then contacted the police. The police told the PI to stop contacting Brad, and from what I understand and what I was told, they told her to stop investigating the case altogether. I haven't spoken to this PI because she worked for John Carter. John said she volunteered to help and he didn't pay her. Brad would also call the Fairfield Police Department on me, but I couldn't give two craps who he called. As I told him in our last conversation, I'm investigating a murder, and I'm going to continue to investigate him with his cooperation or without. He told me I could contact him anytime if I needed to ask him a question before I left North Carolina. Then he calls the police on me. Later, we would send a couple texts to each other. He would tell me to stop harassing him, and again, I would tell him I'm not harassing him, I'm conducting an investigation. But I did tell him I would not text or call anymore. About 8 months after that, I did send him one last text, but I didn't get a response, and I'm not surprised. I didn't really need one. So why is Brad so hesitant to talk to me? Well, later on in this podcast, you'll hear from one of his roommates. Brad was distressed over Facebook followers giving him a nickname of Mr. Saturday Night. And people were trying to follow him and ask him questions about the case. Also going to his house. He was just fed up with the amateur sleuths that were trying to get information from him and saying things that weren't necessarily true. Which makes my job, coming in 3.5 years later, a lot more difficult to interview him or even meet with him. We'll dive into that a little later. In the investigations of highly profiled cases, people come out of the woodwork, especially cases that have huge rewards, which the Katelyn Markham case does. It's the job of the investigator to determine whether or not the claims made by people who come forward are legitimate or not. Sometimes it can cost you a week or two investigating these claims. Others take a couple minutes. Like the one I received where a man was claiming Katelyn had been kidnapped and cloned on a goat farm. He goes on to say the remains found were not Katelyn's, they were the clone, and Katelyn was still alive. Thank you, sir. I'll pass this information on to the police. He says he needs me to get him in touch with an FBI agent because he has vital information on aliens abducting and cloning humans. Let's move on. I also received a call from a man who, well, let's listen and see what he has to say.
Whether it was the actual night of her disappearance or not, I don't know, but we're on or around, yes.
Okay.
I was stopped at the pump to get fuel with my card, and there was a young couple arguing. Well, it wasn't so much of an argument. They was having their differences over telephone. The girl wanted her phone. He denied having the phone, said that she didn't bring it or he didn't grab it, whatever it was, but he didn't have the phone, denied having the phone, and she told him just to leave her alone, give him the phone, and she'll find her way back. He denied having the phone, and she's like, well, just take me back. This is not the way we come. Where are we? And they were standing outside, like if you're facing the store from the pumps, there's two bathroom doors. They was towards the right, or I'm sorry, towards the left rear corner of the building by the farthest bathroom door. Whenever they left. I don't know. Like I said, there was no physical confrontation, so I didn't think much. I didn't think anything of it. People argue all the time. So, especially a young couple. So I left. I went Big Cedar South, across 252 to Big Cedar North. And as I come through the S-curves past Whips, I seen these two walking south on Big Cedar North, which is just a few miles north of where her remains was apparently found.
Did you hear her call him by any name, a certain name?
Yes, but the exact syllable, I don't know. It was either John or Johnny.
Okay. Like I asked you prior to turning on the interview, how do you know it was Katelyn Markham?
Well, I'd seen... Like I said, the exact whereabouts when I seen it, I don't know. I was either sitting on the bar stool at the old shack, or I was at my buddy Graydon's house, because we can ready to change the U-joint and go to Haspin Acres in the Samurai. And it come across the screen, the missing Fairfield woman, whatnot. And for whatever reason, I don't pay no attention to stuff like that. Because like I said, we see it all the time. There's always some sort of Amber Alert, or there's always something, something this or that. And, but for, just whatever reason, I just, I'd glanced at the TV, not even with intentions of seeing who it was, but I just seen, I'm like, well, shit, well, I just seen her the other night. And, that was that. I never thought anything about it, and 2 years later, it's, apparently this was her.
How did you recognize her, though?
She's got, there was something about, and like I said, it's been so long since I've seen her, but there was something about her smile, or her mouth, or her, I don't know if it's her upper teeth or whatnot, but it was just something about, something about that part of her face, and I'm like, that was her. I mean, that's, I don't doubt whatsoever in my heart who it was.
And the guy that was with her, can you briefly describe him?
I don't. And again, I haven't seen, no pictures or anything of anything, but I don't remember this guy being, of good size or anything like that. I mean, I wouldn't, I wouldn't have thought he was maybe 165, 170 pounds. I wouldn't, maybe 100. I don't know. I don't recall him being, real big, real small, or. I would say he was in his, I don't know, early to mid 20s. Somewhere. I don't know. I'm not on. I'm not a picture painter. I didn't.
Let me ask you this: did he have long hair, short hair?
That, if I answer that question, I would be misleading. I can't comment on that, because I don't recall that, of that. When these two was going at it, it was like, is this physical? What's the deal? Oh, it's over phone, two young kids, just this and that. It wasn't. I never thought I'd be doing a missing persons report 3 years later on it.
Right. When you saw them walking, did you get a good visual on him? How much bigger was he than she? And again, you said he was somewhat slender from what you've been telling me, or mid-size.
I mean, it just had a medium build. I mean, I don't, like I said, we're getting on touchy ground that I don't, I'm afraid if I say anything, I'll be misleading you, because I don't, I don't know. I'm kind of hating that, because I can't. I don't know. Maybe if I seen something, if I seen a picture, if it would be any, benefit to you or not, like that. But for me to sit here and give you a description of somebody 3 years ago at 2:00 in the morning, okay. Was, I don't think that it would be fair to yourself, or, anybody else for me to do that, because I don't know. I mean, that's the bottom line. That's as honest as I can answer that question. I don't know.
Okay. So you believe you saw Katelyn Markham around about the time that she disappeared, around 2 o'clock in the morning in Cedar Grove at a gas station that also has a liquor store.
The liquor store it's the gas station and liquor store are separate, but they're right next door to each other.
Okay.
Two separate buildings right next door to each other.
And you saw Katelyn there with an unidentified male that she referred to as John or Johnny.
Correct. I have no doubt whether it was Katelyn or not.
Oh, you have no doubt that it was Katelyn.
I know in my heart that it was Katelyn.
Okay. Do you remember what she had on?
Buddy, I have no clue.
Okay.
And, if I remember, for some, I don't remember it being very cool out that night. I almost remember it being kind of humid that night, but I don't know, man. I wish all this stuff would have surfaced then.
Okay. My first question is, why didn't you pick up the phone and call the police when you saw her on the news as missing, and you supposedly saw her a couple days before in an argument in Indiana with her fiance, who was on the news as well? Because Katelyn was on the news. They put John Carter on the news. I'm sure you saw him. Why did you not report it then? Before turning on the audio recorder, this guy said that Katelyn and John were near the liquor store, which is across the parking lot. Then on the audio, he said they were near the bathrooms, which were attached to the gas station. He admits he doesn't know what day it was, okay? But he could tell the pattern in Katelyn's upper teeth. And you can see it when she smiles, but if they're arguing, I can guarantee you she's not smiling. So how did you see that? You saw it on TV. You described it because you are looking for the reward. So now we go to the description of John. I'll say was not accurate at all. But he knows the tooth pattern from across the parking lot. At night, no less. Gotcha. The phone was widely publicized as missing, and this guy was saying Katelyn and John were fighting over the cell phone. How convenient. Then the question arises about how are they in that area without a vehicle? The location was too far from the Carter property and their homes for them to walk there. So how'd they get there? Also, he said it was 2 a.m., but the gas station closes at 9 p.m. Now, I'm not sure if you could pump gas at the station after hours, pay at the pump kind of service. Back in 2011, I contacted the station today, and they said that it is possible now. She wasn't sure about 2011. Now, here's the kicker. This is what kind of said, okay, this guy is looking for the reward money. I spoke to law enforcement about this individual and was told this. He called in and said he had some information about the Markham case. He told the detective he wanted half the reward money up front before he released the information. The detective explained to him that's not how it works. This guy is also, I should mention, very, very well known to law enforcement in Indiana, if you know what I'm saying. Thanks for listening to Gone at 21. Please like and subscribe. If you're listening on iTunes, please rate and review. Check out the Gone at 21 Facebook page for the latest updates. And while you're there, please like and follow the page. Until next time, I'm Jay Ryan. Take care.